An aging farmer worked overtime for a struggling family, unaware they'd change his life. The thought never crossed Harold Winter's mind as he guided his ancient tractor across the autumn fields, the setting sun casting long shadows over land he'd tilled for 47 years. At 68, his weathered hands bore the calluses and scars of a lifetime spent coaxing life from the reluctant earth. The farm had once vibrated with voices, his wife's laughter, children's footsteps, workers calling across the fields. Now there was only silence, punctuated by the mechanical groans of his tractor and the occasional mournful cry of a hawk circling overhead. Harold's daily routine had narrowed to a predictable path. Rise before dawn, work until dusk, return to an empty farmhouse, sleep, repeat. 4 years since Margaret's passing, and the emptiness remained as raw as the day he'd buried her. Their children had scattered, David to Chicago, Emma to Seattle, both building lives far removed from the unyielding demands of farm life. They called on holidays, sent pictures of grandchildren he barely knew, and made promises to visit that rarely materialized. The October evening air bit through his flannel shirt as Harold shut down the tractor's engine. His joints protested as he climbed down, each movement a reminder of time's relentless march. The farmhouse lights weren't on. He rarely bothered anymore, preferring the anonymity of darkness until absolutely necessary. What was the point of illuminating rooms no one else would enter? "Mr. Winters?" The voice startled him. Harold turned to find a woman standing at the edge of his property, a boy of perhaps 10 years beside her. Even in the fading light, Harold could see the exhaustion etched into her face. "Lisa Reeves," she said, stepping forward with a hesitant smile. "We met at the farmer's market last month. I bought your tomatoes." Harold nodded slowly, recognition dawning. "You asked about picking work." "Yes, sir." Her hand rested protectively on her son's shoulder. "I know harvest season's almost done, but I was hoping—" Her voice faltered. "We're in a tight spot. Any work at all would help." Harold studied them silently. The boy's jacket was too thin for the autumn chill, his sneakers worn at the edges. The woman's clothes were clean but faded, her fingers red and chapped. Something in their quiet dignity stirred a forgotten emotion in his chest. "Not much left to harvest," he said finally, "but there's sorting and packing. Some repairs to the outbuildings before winter." Relief flooded her face. "We can do that. Anything, really." 7 tomorrow morning, Harold said, the words emerging before he'd fully considered them. "Bring work gloves if you have them." "Well, we'll be here," she promised. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. This means everything." As they walked away, the boy glanced back once, his eyes meeting Harold's. Something in that look, a mixture of wariness and hope, followed Harold into his empty house, lingering like the scent of rain before a storm. Harold rose earlier than usual the next morning, brewing coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and frying eggs with mechanical precision. At 6:55, he spotted them walking up the long driveway, punctuality he hadn't expected. The boy, Tyler, he would learn, kicked at stones while his mother smoothed her hair back into a practical ponytail. "There's coffee in the kitchen," Harold said by way of greeting. Work starts in the North Field. For 3 days, they established an uneasy rhythm. Harold assigned tasks, explained processes with minimal words, and kept his distance. Lisa worked with quiet determination, asking intelligent questions and completing each job thoroughly. Tyler proved surprisingly capable for his age, though Harold caught him staring longingly at the tractor more than once. On the 4th day, rain pounded the tin roof of the barn, where they sorted the last of the season's apples. Through the open door, Harold watched the downpour transform his fields into a landscape of mud and mist. "Weather report says it'll clear by evening," Lisa said, breaking the silence. "We can make up the lost field time tomorrow." Harold grunted in acknowledgement, noticing how she said "we" so easily, as if she'd claimed some ownership in his farm's success. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Winters?" Tyler's voice piped up. "How come you farm all alone?" "Tyler," Lisa hissed, "that's not polite." Harold's hand stilled on the apple he was inspecting. "Fair question," he said finally. "Had help once. Family farm. Wife passed. Kids moved on." The condensed history of his life in 8 words. Tyler nodded solemnly. "My dad moved on too, but not like your kids. He just left." "Tyler, Mr. Winters doesn't need to hear about our problems," Lisa said, her cheeks flushing. Harold studied the boy's face, seeing something familiar in the careful way he held himself, as if bracing against disappointment. "Sometimes people leave," Harold said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his tone. "Doesn't mean it's about you." Tyler's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, the three of them existed in a bubble of shared understanding. The rain drummed steadily outside, creating a cocoon of sound around their unexpected connection. That evening, as Lisa and Tyler prepared to leave, Harold found himself saying, "The forecast mentions more rain tomorrow. Got an extra room in the farmhouse. Old bunkhouse too out back. Either would save you the walk." The surprise on Lisa's face gave way to cautious gratitude. "The bunkhouse would be perfect if you're sure. We've been staying at my cousin's, but it's complicated." Harold nodded, leading them to the small building where seasonal workers had once stayed. He'd maintained it out of habit rather than necessity, dusting and airing it occasionally, as if some part of him had been waiting for it to serve a purpose again. That night, seeing lights in the bunkhouse window changed something in Harold. The farm felt less empty somehow. He slept more soundly than he had in months. Days stretched into weeks. Harold found himself talking more, explaining the science behind crop rotation, demonstrating how to repair fencing, showing Tyler how the tractor worked. The boy absorbed everything with eager attention, asking questions that forced Harold to remember why he'd once loved farming. Lisa proved adept at bookkeeping, gently suggesting more efficient ways to track expenses when she noticed Harold's haphazard system. One evening in early November, Harold returned from town to find Lisa in his kitchen, a savory aroma filling the house. "Hope you don't mind," she said, looking suddenly uncertain. "You mentioned you hadn't had beef stew since your wife passed. I found her recipe box in the pantry." Harold stood frozen in the doorway. Margaret's recipe box. He'd forgotten about it, tucked away on the top shelf. The smell of thyme and bay leaf transported him instantly to Sunday dinners from a different lifetime. Tyler set the table. Lisa continued, her words rushing together nervously. "But we can eat in the bunkhouse if you'd prefer." "It's fine," Harold said, his voice rough. He hung his coat on the hook by the door, a simple action he'd performed thousands of times, but now it felt like a declaration. This was still his home, but perhaps it could be something more than an empty shell filled with memories. That dinner marked a turning point. Harold found himself inviting them to eat with him regularly. Lisa began leaving extra portions in his refrigerator on days they worked separately. Tyler started doing his homework at Harold's kitchen table, occasionally asking for help with math problems that forced Harold to dust off knowledge long unused. "You're good at this," Tyler said one evening after Harold helped him understand fractions. "Were you a teacher before you were a farmer?" Harold almost smiled. "Always been a farmer. But I used to help your mother with her homework." Lisa looked up sharply from the potatoes she was peeling. "You remember me as a child?" Harold nodded slowly. "Your father worked summer harvest here 3 years running. You were about 7 when they first came. Used to follow me around asking why the sky was blue and where clouds came from. That's why this place felt familiar." Lisa whispered, something like wonder in her voice. "I remembered the big oak by the north field, but I couldn't place it." "Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle," Harold said, surprised by his own philosophical turn. As November deepened toward Thanksgiving, Harold noticed Lisa growing increasingly tense. One morning, he found her staring at an envelope with a pained expression. "Everything all right?" She startled, quickly folding the paper. "Just bills." "The usual." Harold didn't press, but that afternoon, he overheard her on the phone, her voice tight with controlled desperation. "I understand it's past due, but we've had a situation." "Yes, I'm working, but..." "No, please don't." She fell silent, then said, "Yes, I understand," before hanging up. That evening, Harold left an envelope on her bed in the bunkhouse with 2 months' worth of back pay, more than they'd agreed upon. The next morning, Lisa tried to return it. "It's too much," she insisted, holding out the envelope. "We agreed on day labor rates. Consider it a bonus," Harold said gruffly. "Tyler's been helping with the tractor maintenance. Saved me hiring a mechanic." "Mr. Winters, Harold, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity when it's earned," he replied. "And it's Harold. About time you stopped with the Mr. Winters business." A week before Thanksgiving, disaster struck. Harold woke to find Lisa sitting at his kitchen table at dawn, her face pale. "Tyler's sick," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Fever spiked during the night. He's having trouble breathing." Harold didn't hesitate. "My truck's faster than waiting for an ambulance." The ride to the county hospital was tense. Tyler drifting between consciousness and delirium in the back seat. Lisa murmuring reassurances while her eyes reflected terror. Harold drove with white-knuckled focus, memories of another middle-of-the-night hospital drive threatening to overwhelm him. In the emergency room, Harold paced while doctors examined Tyler. When a nurse approached with admission forms, Lisa's hands trembled as she reached for her wallet. Insurance? The nurse asked. Lisa's face crumpled. I haven't been able to. He's covered under mine, Harold interrupted. Family plan. Lisa stared at him in shock as he produced his Medicare card and identification. Harold, you can't. Already done, he said quietly. Sorted out later. The diagnosis came back as severe pneumonia. Tyler would need to stay hospitalized for several days. As Lisa sat beside her son's bed, Harold slipped out to make a phone call he'd been avoiding for years. David? It's your father. I need a favor. Harold's son, an attorney in Chicago, was silent for a long moment. Dad, is everything okay? Need help with hospital paperwork. Got people staying at the farm. Boy's sick. Mother's got no insurance. The explanation came out in fragments, but David caught on quickly. By evening, he'd arranged for Tyler's medical expenses to be covered through a children's health program Harold hadn't known existed. You've got people staying at the farm? David asked, curiosity evident in his voice. That's different. Harold didn't know how to explain the past weeks, how his barren life had suddenly sprouted unexpected growth, so he simply said, things change. For 3 days, Harold and Lisa took shifts at Tyler's bedside. Harold brought books from home, adventure stories he'd once read to his own children, and surprised himself by reading aloud when Tyler was awake, his voice growing stronger with each chapter. You're really good at the different voices, Tyler whispered during a story about pirates and hidden treasure. Harold felt something crack inside his chest, a good breaking, like ice giving way to spring. Had practice, he said simply. When Tyler was released from the hospital, winter had firmly established itself across the landscape. The fields lay dormant under a thin blanket of early snow, the farmhouse windows glowing with warmth against the cold. Harold had spent Tyler's hospital stay preparing, cleaning the spare bedroom that had once belonged to Emma, fixing the leaky faucet in the adjoining bathroom, dragging a desk from the attic so Tyler would have somewhere to do his homework. What's all this? Lisa asked when Harold led them not to the bunkhouse but to the farmhouse. Bunkhouse isn't insulated properly for winter, Harold said matter-of-factly. Boy needs proper heat while he recovers. Tyler's eyes widened at the bedroom. Is this for me? For now, Harold said, unwilling to make promises he couldn't keep, even as something in him hoped they would stay. That evening, Lisa found Harold in the barn, meticulously oiling leather harnesses that hadn't been used in years. Why are you helping us? She asked directly. The truth, Harold. You've done more than give us work. You've saved us, really. Harold's hands stilled on the leather. The truth was complex, layered like the soil he'd worked all his life. Farm's too big for one person, he said finally. Always was. That's not a real answer. He sighed, setting aside the harness. When Margaret died, I stopped living. Just existed. Kept working because that's what I know how to do. He gestured vaguely toward the farmhouse. You and Tyler brought something back. Noise. Purpose. He paused, searching for words. Reminds me there's more to life than waiting for it to end. Lisa's eyes glistened in the barn's dim light. We can't replace what you've lost. Not asking you to, Harold said. But maybe we all found something we needed. As December arrived, they settled into a new rhythm. Tyler recovered quickly, returned to school, and came home bursting with stories each afternoon. Lisa found part-time work at the local library while continuing to help Harold with farm administration. Harold began planning spring planting with a vigor he hadn't felt in years. One evening, Lisa received a phone call that left her visibly shaken. After Tyler went to bed, she found Harold in his usual chair by the fireplace. My ex-husband's coming to town, she said without preamble. He says he wants to see Tyler. Harold felt a protective surge he hadn't experienced since his own children were young. That what you want? It doesn't matter what I want. He has legal rights. She twisted her hands together. He abandoned us 3 years ago, but he's still Tyler's father. People can change, Harold said, though his tone suggested skepticism. Sometimes, Lisa agreed, but Jason has a pattern. He shows up, makes promises, disappears. Each time it destroys Tyler a little more. She sank into the chair opposite Harold. We left our last place because Jason was pressuring me to get back together. That's why we were staying with my cousin. Hiding, really. Harold stared into the fire, piecing together the fragments of their story he'd gathered over the weeks. He know where you are now? My cousin told him. She means well, thinks Tyler needs his father. Lisa looked directly at Harold. We can find somewhere else to stay until he leaves town. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. This is your home now, Harold said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. You'll face him here if that's what you want. Or I'll tell him to leave if that's what you want. Your choice. Our home? Lisa whispered. Harold nodded slowly. If you want it to be. Jason Reeves arrived 2 days later, roaring up the driveway in a sports car that seemed deliberately out of place among the practical trucks and tractors of farm country. Harold watched from the porch as Lisa met her ex-husband in the yard. Their conversation too distant to hear, but their body language telling its own story. Jason animated and insistent. Lisa contained and resolute. When Tyler emerged from the school bus at the end of the driveway, his steps faltered at the sight of his father. Harold felt his heart constrict as the boy approached cautiously, stopping several feet away from Jason. Hey, buddy, Jason exclaimed, arms spread wide. Look how big you've gotten. Tyler didn't move into the offered embrace. Why are you here? To see you, of course. I've missed you like crazy. Harold remained on the porch, present but unintrusive, a silent support as the scene unfolded. He watched Tyler's small shoulders square with a courage no child should have to summon in the presence of a parent. You left, Tyler said simply. You didn't call on my birthday. Jason's smile faltered. I know, buddy, and I'm sorry. Things have been complicated. But I'm here now. I've got a great job in Denver, and I'm thinking maybe you and your mom could move out there. I've got an apartment with an extra bedroom just for you. Harold saw Lisa stiffen, saw Tyler glance toward the farmhouse, toward him, before looking back at his father. We live here now, Tyler said. This isn't your home, son. This is just where you're staying for a while. Jason cast a dismissive glance around the farm. Don't you want to live in a real house in the city? Have friends in a proper neighborhood? I have friends at school, Tyler said. And Harold's teaching me to drive the tractor in the spring. Jason's expression darkened. Harold? You're calling him by his first name? He turned to Lisa. What kind of arrangement do you have here exactly? Harold had heard enough. He descended the porch steps slowly, deliberately, years of physical labor evident in his still powerful frame, despite his age. Jason Reeves? He said, his voice steady. I'm Harold Winters. This is my farm. Jason sized him up. Look, I appreciate you giving my family a place to crash, but this is between me and them. No, Tyler said suddenly, his voice small but firm. You don't get to come here and pretend you care after you left us with nothing. Tyler, Jason's face reddened. That's no way to talk to your father. A father sticks around, Harold said quietly. A father puts his child before himself. And what would you know about it? Jason snapped. Lisa, who is this guy to you? Your new boyfriend? Your landlord? He's family, Lisa said, the simple declaration hanging in the crisp winter air. Jason looked between them, calculation replacing anger in his eyes. I see. Well, Lisa, I still have parental rights. If you're shacking up with someone, the courts might have something to say about that. Harold stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Jason and Lisa. Son, I've lived enough years to recognize a man running a con when I see one. You're not here for Tyler. You're here because something else fell through, and you're looking for a soft place to land. His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. If you want to be part of your boy's life, you'll need to prove it through actions, not threats. Jason's facade cracked. You have no idea what I've been through. No, and I don't much care. Harold interrupted. What I care about is that boy. He nodded toward Tyler, who was now standing close to Lisa, his hand in hers. So here's what's going to happen. You're welcome to visit Tyler with Lisa's permission and supervision. You're welcome to build a relationship with your son through consistency and respect. But you're not taking him anywhere, and you're not disrupting the stability he's finally found. For a moment, it seemed Jason might argue further, but something in Harold's steady gaze made him reconsider. With a final glare, he returned to his car, calling out, This isn't over, Lisa. I'll be at the motel in town. Call me when you're ready to talk sensibly. As the car disappeared down the driveway, Tyler looked up at Harold. He's not going to take me away, is he? Harold rested a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. Not if I have anything to say about it. That night, after Tyler was asleep, Lisa found Harold in the kitchen, staring into a cup of tea gone cold. Thank you, she said simply, sitting across from him. Harold nodded. Meant what I said. You're family now. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. You know, when we first came here, I just needed work, any work. I never expected, she gestured around her. This, a home, someone who cares. Works both ways, Harold said gruffly. You brought life back to this place. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes illuminated by the kitchen lights spilling through the window. Inside, two people who had been adrift found themselves anchored by unexpected connection. In the weeks that followed, Jason made several attempts to insert himself into their lives, each one more transparent than the last. He brought expensive toys for Tyler that spoke more to an adult's interest than a child's. He suggested outings that conveniently required Lisa's presence as well. When those approaches failed, he tried guilt, anger, and finally, thinly veiled legal threats. Through it all, Harold remained a steady presence, consulting quietly with David about legal protections for Lisa and Tyler, accompanying them to meetings with Jason when asked, stepping back when appropriate. He watched with quiet pride as Lisa stood her ground, setting boundaries with increasing confidence. By Christmas, Jason's visits had dwindled to occasional phone calls. Tyler approached these conversations with cautious hope, but no longer seemed devastated when promises went unfulfilled. The farmhouse, meanwhile, transformed with subtle signs of permanence, Lisa's books appearing on shelves, Tyler's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, a second coat hook installed by the doors specifically for Tyler's height. On Christmas Eve, Harold disappeared into the barn for several hours, emerging only when called for dinner. The next morning, Tyler raced downstairs to find not only the gifts he and Lisa had wrapped for each other, but a large object covered by an old blanket. What's this? Tyler asked, looking between Harold and his mother. Open it and see, Harold suggested, a rare smile softening his features. Beneath the blanket stood a handcrafted wooden desk, sized perfectly for Tyler, with drawers and compartments for school supplies and treasures. I made one for your mother when she was about your age, Harold revealed. Her father helped me with that one. Figured it was time you had your own. Tyler ran his hands over the smooth wood, opening each drawer with reverence. You made this? For me? Every farmer needs to know his way around a wood shop, Harold said. Winter work, when the fields are sleeping. It's the best present ever, Tyler declared, throwing his arms around Harold's waist. Harold's hand came to rest on Tyler's head, the simple gesture conveying what words could not. Over the boy's head, his eyes met Lisa's, and a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just a gift, it was a promise of permanence, of commitment, of a future together. As winter deepened, the farm settled into a peaceful rhythm. Lisa's library job became permanent, offering benefits that included health insurance for her and Tyler. Harold found himself accompanying them to school events and community gatherings, gradually reconnecting with a social world he'd abandoned after Margaret's death. In late January, David called. Dad, Emma and I have been talking. We'd like to come visit in the spring. Meet Lisa and Tyler. Harold sat heavily in his chair, emotion catching him off guard. That would be good, he managed. Mom would be happy, you know, David said carefully. That you're not alone anymore. I know, Harold replied, his voice rough. After hanging up, Harold walked to the mantel where Margaret's photograph stood. You'd like them, he told her quietly. The boy reminds me of David sometimes. And Lisa, she's strong like you were. Spring arrived with a gentle persistence, green shoots pushing through soil warmed by lengthening days. Harold found himself planning more ambitiously than he had in years, expanding the vegetable garden, considering new crops, even discussing the possibility of farmers' market stalls with Lisa, who had revealed an unexpected talent for preserves and baked goods. On a mild April morning, Harold took Tyler on the promised tractor driving lesson, the boy's face alight with concentration and joy as he carefully navigated the field's edge. From the porch, Lisa watched them, her expression contemplative. That evening, after Tyler was in bed, she joined Harold on the porch swing that had been Margaret's favorite spot. I've been thinking, she began, her voice tentative. About the future? Harold nodded, waiting. Tyler's thriving here. I've never seen him so happy, so confident. She paused. And I feel the same. But I need to know what you want, Harold. Is this a temporary arrangement for you? Or something more permanent? Harold considered her question, giving it the weight it deserved. When you first came looking for work, I thought it would be temporary. Didn't expect to care what happened to you both. He looked out over the fields, soft in the gathering twilight. Now I can't imagine this place without you. I can't either, Lisa admitted. But I need to be practical. You're Tyler's world now. And if this ends, doesn't have to end, Harold interrupted. There's legal ways to make things more permanent. If that's what you want, Lisa's eyes widened slightly. Are you suggesting not marriage? Harold clarified quickly. That's not what I'm offering, and I don't think it's what you're looking for. He took a breath. But there's other options. Joint ownership of the farm eventually. Maybe adoption for Tyler, if that's something you'd both want someday. Hey? Harold, Lisa whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Don't need to say anything now, he assured her. Just wanted you to know I'm in this for good. Whatever shape it takes. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell completely, the weight of possibility settling around them like a comfortable blanket. David and Emma arrived in May with their families. 5 grandchildren Harold barely knew, ranging from toddler to teenager. The initial awkwardness dissolved quickly as Tyler eagerly showed his new cousins around the farm, and Lisa charmed them all with her warmth and cooking. On their last evening, David found Harold alone in the barn, organizing tools with the precision of long habit. You've built something good here, Dad, David said. Not just the farm, this family. Harold nodded, accepting the observation without comment. Emma and I talked. David continued. We'd like to come back more often. Maybe the grandkids could spend part of their summer breaks here. If that wouldn't be too much. Harold set down the wrench he'd been holding. Your mother always wanted the place full of grandkids in the summer. I know we haven't been around much, David acknowledged. After Mom died, it was hard to come back. But seeing you now, with Lisa and Tyler, it's like the farm is alive again. Took an aging farmer working overtime for a struggling family to figure out what matters, Harold said, a rare smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Turns out they changed my life without even trying. Later that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Harold stood on the porch looking at the stars. The same stars that had watched over this land for generations. The same stars Margaret had loved to identify on summer evenings. He thought about the unlikely journey of the past 8 months. How Lisa and Tyler had arrived like seeds blown by chance onto fallow ground. How they'd taken root, flourished, and in doing so, revitalized soil he thought was permanently depleted. Inside the house slept his growing family. His children and grandchildren, Lisa and Tyler, all under one roof for the first time. Tomorrow, David and Emma would leave, but with promises to return, bridges being carefully rebuilt. Lisa and Tyler would remain, continuing this unexpected chapter of his life. Harold breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the night air scented with spring growth and possibility. At 68, when he thought his story was winding down to a lonely conclusion, he'd instead found a new beginning. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had spent decades nurturing crops had needed these 2 wounded souls to teach him how to grow again himself. He thought of Tyler's face that afternoon, alight with joy as he showed his cousins how to collect eggs without disturbing the hens. He thought of Lisa's quiet competence as she moved through the kitchen alongside Emma. 2 women finding common ground and shared stories. He thought of his own heart, once narrowed by grief, now expanding daily with each small moment of connection. An aging farmer worked overtime for a struggling family, unaware they'd change his life. The simplicity of the statement belied its profound truth. Harold hadn't just given Lisa and Tyler shelter and work. They had given him purpose, joy, and a future he could once again look forward to. In the quiet bargain struck between 3 wounded souls, each had found healing they hadn't known they were seeking. As the night deepened around him, Harold finally turned back toward the house, not just a building of wood and stone, but once again, finally a home.